Let's go again.
Good to go.
We should go.
Go Cats.
Go for it.
Keep going, keep going.
Let go.
3, 4, let's go. At Villanova University,
Go ahead.
our restless hearts, curious minds, and limitless drive propel us forward.
Let's go!
Ignite change, go Nova.
You spend your youth envisioning what's possible. If you believe enough, you grow up and become it. Greatness doesn't happen overnight. Watch Carson's vision become reality with the time-tested power of Xfinity Internet. With enough speed to connect hundreds of devices, you can stream Team USA in every room on every screen. Get Xfinity Internet for just $30 a month for 12 months with no annual contract and unlimited data included. Get the fastest connection to Paris with Xfinity.
Wawa has the right drinks for the right time. And now you can add electrolytes, so you can refresh post-pickleball, prepare to perform, or reset the weekend. Add electrolytes to any iced or frozen drink to help support hydration. Gotta have a Wawa.
Our usual Wednesday lineup will be seen in its entirety after ABC News.
Tonight, President Biden addressing the nation from the Oval Office, the president's historic decision to withdraw from the race for the White House, his goals for his remaining 6 months in office, and his message tonight to a divided America. ABC News live coverage begins right now.
The ABC News special, President Biden, the decision, address to the nation. The president speaking for the first time since exiting the race for the White House. His hope, to finish the job he started. Now reporting, David Muir.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us on this historic night. We are just moments away from President Biden's Oval Office address to the nation. For the first time, he will speak to the American people about his very personal and likely wrenching decision to withdraw from the race for the White House. We are told that he will argue in his words that the defense of democracy is more important than any title, and he will outline his remaining 6 months in office. Pressure to drop out had been mounting for weeks following his alarming debate performance against Donald Trump. The president revealing his decision Sunday in a letter addressed to my fellow Americans, acknowledging, quote, "I believe it is in the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down." Tonight's address, a defining moment in his presidency, passing the torch to Vice President Kamala Harris, now the Democratic Party's presumptive nominee. The president will signal tonight he will now fight for his vice president. Let's listen to President Biden.
My fellow Americans, I'm speaking to you tonight from behind the resolute desk in the Oval Office. In this sacred space, I'm surrounded by portraits of extraordinary American presidents. Thomas Jefferson wrote the immortal words that guide this nation. George Washington, who showed us presidents are not kings. Abraham Lincoln, who implored us to reject malice. Franklin Roosevelt, who inspired us to reject fear. I revere this office, but I love my country more. It's been the honor of my life to serve as your president. But in the defense of democracy, which is at stake, I think it's more important than any title. I draw strength and I find joy in working for the American people. But this sacred task of perfecting our union is not about me. It's about you, your families, your futures. It's about we, the people. We can never forget that, and I never have. I've made it clear that I believe America is at an inflection point. One of those rare moments in history when the decisions we make now will determine our fate of our nation and the world for decades to come. America's going to have to choose between moving forward or backward, between hope and hate, between unity and division. We have to decide, do we still believe in honesty, decency, respect, freedom, justice, and democracy? In this moment, we can see those we disagree with not as enemies, but as fellow Americans. Can we do that? Does character in public life still matter? I believe I know the answer to these questions because I know you, the American people. And I know this, we are a great nation because we are good people. When you elected me to this office, I promised to always level with you, to tell you the truth. And the truth, the sacred cause of this country is larger than any one of us. And those of us who cherish that cause cherish it so much. A cause of American democracy itself must unite to protect it. You know, in recent weeks, it's become clear to me that I need to unite my party in this critical endeavor. I believe my record as president, my leadership in the world, my vision for America's future, all merited a second term. But nothing can come in the way of saving our democracy. That includes personal ambition. So I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation. That's the best way to unite our nation. You know, there is a time and a place for long years of experience in public life. There's also a time and a place for new voices, fresh voices, yes, younger voices. And that time and place is now. Over the next 6 months, I'll be focused on doing my job as president. That means I'll continue to lower costs for hardworking families, grow our economy. I'll keep defending our personal freedoms and our civil rights, from the right to vote to the right to choose. I'll keep calling out hate and extremism. Make it clear there is no place in America for political violence or any violence ever, period. I'm going to keep speaking out to protect our kids from gun violence, our planet from climate crisis that is the existential threat. And I will keep fighting for my cancer moonshot so we can end cancer as we know it, because we can do it. I'm going to call for Supreme Court reform because this is critical to our democracy, Supreme Court reform. You know, I will keep working to ensure America remains strong, secure, and the leader of the free world. I'm the first president in this century to report to the American people that the United States is not at war anywhere in the world. We'll keep rallying a coalition of proud nations to stop Putin from taking over Ukraine and doing more damage. We'll keep NATO stronger, and I'll make it more powerful and more united than any time in all of our history. I'll keep doing the same for our allies in the Pacific. You know, when I came to office, the conventional wisdom was that China would inevitably surpass the United States. That's not the case anymore. And I'm going to keep working to end the war in Gaza, bring home all the hostages, and bring peace and security to the Middle East and end this war. We're also working around the clock to bring home Americans being unjustly detained all around the world. You know, we've come so far since my inauguration. On that day, I told you, as I stood in that winter, we stood in a winter of peril and a winter of possibilities. Peril and possibilities. We were in the grip of the worst pandemic in the century, the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression, the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. But we came together as Americans, and we got through it. We emerged stronger, more prosperous, and more secure. Today, we have the strongest economy in the world, creating nearly 16 million new jobs, a record. Wages are up. Inflation continues to come down. The racial wealth gap is the lowest it's been in 20 years. We're literally rebuilding our entire nation, urban, suburban, rural, and tribal communities. Manufacturing has come back to America. We're leading the world again in chips and science and innovation. We finally beat Big Pharma after all these years to lower the cost of prescription drugs for seniors. And I'm going to keep fighting to make sure we lower the cost for everyone, not just seniors. More people have health care today in America than ever before. And I signed one of the most significant laws helping millions of veterans and their families who are exposed to toxic materials. You know, most significant climate law ever in the history of the world. The first major gun safety law in 30 years. And today, the violent crime rate is at a 50-year low. We're also securing our border. Border crossings are lower today than when the previous administration left office. I've kept my commitment to appoint the first black woman to the Supreme Court of the United States of America. I also kept my commitment to have an administration that looks like America and be a president for all Americans. That's what I've done. I ran for president 4 years ago because I believed and still do that the soul of America was at stake. The very nature of who we are was at stake. And that's still the case. America's an idea stronger than any army, bigger than any ocean, more powerful than any dictator or tyrant. It's the most powerful idea in the history of the world. That idea is that we hold these truths to be self-evident. We're all created equal, endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights: life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. We've never fully lived up to it, to this sacred idea, but we've never walked away from it either. And I do not believe the American people will walk away from it now. In just a few months, the American people will choose the course of America's future. I made my choice. I've made my views known. I would like to thank our great Vice President, Kamala Harris. She's experienced, she's tough, she's capable. She's been an incredible partner to me and a leader for our country. Now the choice is up to you, the American people. When you make that choice, remember the words of Benjamin Franklin that's hanging on my wall here in the Oval Office, alongside the busts of Dr. King and Rosa Parks and Cesar Chavez. When Ben Franklin was asked, as he emerged from the convention going on, whether the founders had given America a monarchy or republic, Franklin's response was, a republic, if you can keep it. A republic, if you can keep it. Whether we keep our republic is now in your hands. My fellow Americans, it's been the privilege of my life to serve this nation for over 50 years. Nowhere else on earth could a kid with a stutter, from modest beginnings in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and Claymont, Delaware, one day sit behind the resolute desk in the Oval Office as President of the United States. But here I am. That's what's so special about America. We're a nation of promise and possibilities, of dreamers and doers, of ordinary Americans doing extraordinary things. I've given my heart and my soul to our nation, like so many others. I've been blessed a million times in return with the love and support of the American people. I hope you have some idea how grateful I am to all of you. The great thing about America is here, kings and dictators do not rule, the people do. History is in your hands. The power is in your hands. The idea of America lies in your hands. We just have to keep faith, keep the faith, and remember who we are. We're the United States of America, and there's simply nothing beyond our capacity when we do it together. So let's act together, preserve our democracy. God bless you all. May God protect our troops. Thank you.
A moment in history tonight. President Biden in the Oval Office. You heard him say there to the American people, I revere this office. I love my country more. He talked about this being not about me. It's about you. It's about we, the people. He said, we cannot forget that. I never have. He did ask this question. He says, does character in public life still matter as we head toward the November election? And he said nothing should come in the way of preserving democracy in this country. We do have our entire powerhouse political team here tonight. Let's get right to ABC's chief White House correspondent, Mary Bruce. And Mary, you had reported that this was a deeply personal decision. It was closely held, a very small group with him, including his wife, the First Lady, Jill Biden, that he began to come to this decision Saturday night. Then on Sunday made it official, calling the vice president, informing her of his plan to step aside in the race, then informing his immediate team, then just 1 minute later sending out that statement to the nation, my fellow Americans, it started. But tonight, Mary, he explained what he believes are the stakes in this election, and he argued for himself that in the end, President Biden believes that what is at stake here is actually larger than any title, larger than even staying in the race himself.
David, the president saying he has given his heart and his soul to this country, and he is doing that again by deciding to step out of this race. Listening to that speech, it felt very much like Joe Biden's love letter to the country that he has devoted his life and his career to serving, protecting, and defending. And you heard him say nothing can get in the way of saving our democracy, including personal ambition. You know, when he decided to run back in 2020, he did it promising to be a bridge, a transitional candidate to the next generation. But when he announced his reelection, he said he had to finish the job. Tonight, he is making it clear that finishing the job means he needs to pass on the torch. He needs to pass the baton and help Kamala Harris now win the White House, saying now is the time for the next generation. He is also, of course, making it clear his work is not done here. He has 6 more months left in office. He wants to use that time to help cement his legacy. But, David, the thing that Joe Biden will likely be most remembered for is this very moment. The way in which he is exiting this race. He did it in many ways to preserve his legacy, but David, it will likely be the thing that ends up defining it.
Well, Mary, I wanted to read you a statement moments ago that came in some color, in fact, if you will, from inside the White House. Someone inside this circle, the close circle, who has spent time with the president and the family over the last few days, the Biden family, telling ABC News tonight that the only thing I can say is, contrary to the reports I've heard, there is no anger, no remorse with the Biden family. There is only a deep sense of pride and an enormous amount of gratitude and appreciation for the overwhelming recognition of Biden as a true patriot and historic defender of democracy.
And, David, I think that is a sentiment that is shared not only by the family, but also by the staff here at the White House. I can tell you that right now, there are about 500 members of the president's staff, people who have devoted so much time and energy to this administration and his fight for what the country can stand for. They are now right now huddled in the state dining room, in the East Room, watching these remarks all together, witnessing this history together, David.
No question, a difficult and challenging night for that team that has worked so closely with the president and even the Biden family themselves, having been able to get used to this decision over the evolution Saturday, Sunday, into early this week. It still must be profound to have watched Jill watch her husband and the rest of the family watch their father, their grandfather, deliver the news in that way tonight. Mary, thank you. Stay with us here. I know our coverage is going to continue. Mary's going to be back in just a moment, but I do want to bring in our chief Washington correspondent, Jonathan Karl. John, it's really impossible to overstate here how wrenching this decision must have been. You know, this is a president who for weeks, we saw it, we reported it here. He was determined to stay in this race, even under growing pressure to step down from the campaign, from some of the very Democratic leaders who were his partners in getting elected in 2020. What have you learned about what the turning point was for President Biden in eventually making this decision?
Well, and David, you know, you could hear it in what he said tonight. He believed that his record merited a second term. He did not want to make this decision. This was a decision that he was very much forced to make. He did it. There was nothing in that speech that suggested that he didn't believe that he could serve another 4 years. Nothing that suggested that his health would have gotten in the way. He said he did it because of party unity. The party needed to be unified. So in answer to your question, a critical moment in all of this, there are many critical moments, but perhaps most was a week ago Saturday when Chuck Schumer, the Senate leader, of course, remember, Joe Biden is a man of the Senate. He spent most of his life serving in the Senate. So when the Democratic leader of the Senate went to see him at Rehoboth Beach, and as we first reported, urged him to take this step in the name for his own good, for the good of his party, for the good of his country. I'm told that at the end of that meeting, Biden said to Schumer, "I need another week." And the two men hugged and went on. So it was exactly a week after that moment that Biden began the process of making that decision you heard Mary Bruce describe, of deciding to get out of this race, a decision he very much did not want to make.
And John, those deeply personal words near the top of what he said the defense of democracy, which is at stake, I think is more important than any title.
Yeah, and he made the point, he used the phrase inflection point, that we're at an inflection point in our country where the decisions we make now, the things we do now, will impact the course of history for many years to come. I think that's almost certainly correct. But in terms of Biden's legacy, the question will be what happens now? Does Kamala Harris win in November? If she doesn't, people will look back at this moment and ask, why didn't Joe Biden do it earlier?
that would be the case, certainly, come November if they do not win in this election. John Carl, I know you're staying with us over the course of the hour as well. I wanted to also bring in ABC's Rachel Scott, covered the campaign trail, both the Biden campaign and the Trump campaign. And Rachel, obviously, as you heard John and Mary say there, this is going to be a legacy-defining moment for President Biden. He's thrown his full support in recent days and again tonight in front of the American people behind his vice president, Kamala Harris. You know, he said back in 2020 that he wanted to be a bridge to the next generation. Mary alluded to that, and it would appear that that's exactly what he's now trying to do here tonight.
Tonight, President Biden is that bridge to the next generation. He said tonight that it was time to pass the torch. He called it the best way to unite the nation. The president put it very bluntly. He said that there's a time and place for long careers, decades in politics, and that there's a time and place for fresh voices, fresh faces. And he said that time and place is right now. You know, David, as the president was speaking, I thought back to how President Biden once introduced Kamala Harris to the nation, saying that he was thinking about all the brown and black little girls out there that was seeing a black and South Asian woman in a new way, a way that they may have not ever seen before. Tonight, Kamala Harris, the presumptive Democratic nominee, becomes the first black and South Asian woman on a major party ticket, David.
Rachel Scott with us here tonight for our coverage as well. Rachel, we'll see you shortly. With President Biden's decision on Sunday, it was nothing short of a political earthquake. The presidential race immediately upended. The Biden campaign, now the Harris campaign tonight. Two new national polls showing the race tightening already. The Reuters Ipsos poll actually has Vice President Harris leading Donald Trump by 2 points. Another new poll out tonight showing Donald Trump's national lead shrinking. Kamala Harris getting closer to Trump in that poll. Obviously, this is all still very early, and it will all come down to the battleground states. So Mary Bruce tonight on how this race has changed and quickly.
For Kamala Harris, a whirlwind transition from Joe Biden's loyal number 2 to the new standard bearer for the Democratic Party, their new hope for defeating Donald Trump.
Do we want to live in a country of freedom, compassion, and rule of law, or a country of chaos, fear, and hate?
It was just minutes after dropping out of the race that Biden anointed Harris his successor, giving her his full support and endorsement and telling Democrats it's time to come together. His campaign office becoming hers, the president phoning in these marching orders.
I'm hoping you'll give every bit of your heart and soul that you gave to me to Kamala.
And we've been
Harris then taking the mic, but Biden still on the phone.
We love Joe and Jill. We really do. They truly are like family to us. And we do, everybody here does.
It's mutual.
I knew you were still there. You're not going anywhere, Joe.
I'm watching you, kid. I'm watching you, kid. I love you.
I love you, Joe.
The top Democrats in the country uniting behind her campaign. Within 48 hours, she had commitments from enough delegates to secure the nomination. More than $100 million in donations pouring in. And then she was off, hitting the campaign trail.
The path to the White House goes through Wisconsin.
Her historic candidacy welcomed in battleground Wisconsin by the biggest crowd a Democrat has seen this cycle.
It's a her story moment, correction.
Her story?
Yes, and she will make it with our help.
Harris reintroducing herself to America as a former prosecutor ready to make the case against Trump.
I took on perpetrators of all kinds. Predators who abused women, fraudsters who ripped off consumers, cheaters who broke the rules for their own gain. So hear me when I say, I know Donald Trump's type.
Her early message aimed squarely at the middle class.
Building up the middle class will be a defining goal of my presidency. Because here's the thing we all here, Wisconsin, know. When our middle class is strong, America is strong.
As vice president, Harris has been the administration's leading voice on an issue Democrats are counting on to energize voters in November, abortion. Now at the top of the ticket, she's doubling down.
Donald Trump, the former president, handpicked 3 members of the United States Supreme Court. because he intended for them to overturn Roe v. Wade. Well, let me tell you something. When I am president of the United States, and when Congress passes a law to restore those freedoms, I will sign it into law. We are not playing around.
Let's get back to Mary Bruce at the White House. And Mary, you were in Milwaukee. You were inside that rally, the vice president's first campaign rally as the top of the ticket. Now the presumptive nominee, very different running for president than running as the running mate. Can you describe for the audience tonight what you witnessed in that room, any evolution you might have witnessed in the vice president? And the second part of my question is, you know, Kamala Harris made it very clear that she believes she is uniquely qualified as a former prosecutor to make the case for the Democrats against Donald Trump.
David, she is in many ways now reintroducing herself to the American people. As you mentioned, you know, they know her as vice president, as a running mate, but as the top of a ticket, that is a very different role. And you felt that in that room yesterday. The energy, the enthusiasm was palpable, and she also seemed different. She is trying to lean into this, obviously, in a different way. She is leaning into that history and experience of hers, reminding everyone that, yes, she was the former Attorney General of California, and she believes that she is uniquely qualified to prosecute the case against Trump. She's also going to have to reintroduce herself personally to the American people. I can tell you so many voters I talked to there yesterday, especially women, were extremely excited at the prospect of having a woman finally in the White House. But David, we are going to have to watch closely over the coming weeks and days to see how she distinguishes herself, how she may distance herself from the president. She has inherited his campaign, but so far the only real big difference is the messenger and how that message is being delivered.
Before I move on to this, all this talk about running mates, obviously everyone's reading the tea leaves out there. I wanted to ask you, Mary, about something you were telling us just a moment ago while that piece was playing on the air. You actually, at the end of the Oval Office address, thought you had heard applause coming from the White House.
David, you might be able to hear it right now. Behind me, massive applause and cheering from what I gather are those hundreds of staffers who were watching that address in the residence right now. And we heard what I know now is the president's voice saying hello, hello, hello as he walked into that space. He is now greeting his staff who love him very dearly, as you may be able to hear behind me.
Watching very closely each and every word in that Oval Office tonight. Mary, thank you. As I mentioned, the speculation is growing over Vice President Harris's short list of potential running mates. Arizona Senator Mark Kelly, of course, a retired astronaut, a veteran, and married to former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords. And Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, very popular in his home state, a key battleground, of course, Pennsylvania. You need to win the White House. Both are believed to be among the early favorites here. So tonight, Jonathan Karl is back with what we've learned so far about the potential contenders for running mate.
Now that she has the support of enough delegates to lock up the Democratic nomination, Kamala Harris has her first big decision to make, and she has to make it quickly, choosing a running mate. Vetting of potential candidates has already begun. Sources briefed on the process say there are at least 4 elected Democrats under consideration, including Josh Shapiro, the popular governor of must-win Pennsylvania, Arizona Senator Mark Kelly, an astronaut and husband of former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, who survived an assassination attempt in 2011, Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear, a moderate and a rare Democratic governor in a red state, and North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper, a moderate who has known Harris for some 20 years, going back to when she was the Attorney General of California and he was the AG of North Carolina.
North Carolina is in play. Donald Trump is obviously worried because he's coming to Charlotte today because he wants to try and shore up North Carolina, and I believe that we can win this state for Kamala Harris.
Today, Governor Shapiro reminded voters of just how important his state will be in November.
The road to the White House leads through Pennsylvania. And listen, it also doesn't take an expert to know the last 2 presidential races came down to a point or less. I expect this race will be close as well.
And as Harris undoubtedly knows, Shapiro himself won Pennsylvania 2 years ago in a 15-point landslide. As for Kentucky Governor Beshear, he's been elected twice in a state dominated by Republicans, and he's been showing he's ready to take on Donald Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, offering something of a preview of a vice presidential debate.
J.D. Vance is a phony. He's fake. I mean, he first says that Donald Trump is like Hitler, and now he's acting like he's Lincoln. I mean, the problem with J.D. Vance is he has no conviction. but I guess his running mate has 34.
Senator Mark Kelly from border state Arizona is a moderate with a more conservative approach to the issue of securing the border, perhaps the biggest issue for Republicans. Today, ABC asked if he wanted to be Harris's running mate. He didn't directly answer.
You know, it's not about me. What is important here is we have an opportunity in November to make a really important choice. And the choice could not be more clear. Who should take this country into the forward? I don't want to see us go back to the past. This is a choice between a prosecutor, who's very experienced, works really hard, has done a great job, and a convicted felon.
Really interesting to watch these potential contenders be interviewed almost hourly with each day that passes. John Carl back with us tonight. And John, how soon could we see Kamala Harris choose a running mate?
Really soon, David. In fact, the virtual roll call where the party is to, at least under the current schedule, to formally pick their nominees for president, that'll be Kamala Harris, and vice president begins in a week, 1 week, and it ends on August 7th. What I am told is the goal is to have it done, have the choice done by August 7th. That would give them just 2 weeks to complete a process that in any other presidential cycle usually takes a matter of a couple of months.
So at this point, we think Kamala Harris and her running mate will know, the country will know by August 7th?
That's the plan right now, David, but we've never seen a running mate chosen on such a short timeline.
And John, I don't want to put you on the spot. You listed a number of potential contenders there. What are your sources telling you about who they might be leaning toward on that list?
I think that those four are at the top of the list. There are other names that certainly are being looked at, but Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, gives Kamala Harris the possibility, if the research, which undoubtedly they're doing right now, shows to win the state of Pennsylvania, if they think they can win Pennsylvania with Josh Shapiro, I think that puts him right near the top of that list. And you could say the same about Roy Cooper in North Carolina, another very key state. But I think all four of those names mentioned, are very much, very actively under consideration.
All right. John Carl with us again tonight. John, you know I'll likely ask you the same question again tomorrow night on World News. I'll see you then. In the meantime, I want to bring in the former head of the DNC, ABC News contributor Donna Brazil with me here tonight. And Donna, we all know, we're all students of history here. LBJ, March 1968, telling the nation that he would not seek a re-election. But this was different. Obviously, this is much closer to Election Day, hearing this message from the Oval Office and President Biden. And in deeply personal terms tonight, in modern American politics, have you ever seen anything like this?
No, I haven't, David. And look, I've been a student of American politics since I was 9 years old when I worked on my first campaign to get a playground in my neighborhood back in Kenner, Louisiana. It's an emotional night for me, David, for obvious reasons. Joe Biden has been one of those leaders in our country that have taken so many people over the bridge. His entire history in public service has been one of commitment to freedom and democracy and justice. And so for many of us, and those of us who have known Joe Biden for years, I've known him for 37 years, this sacrifice, this ultimate sacrifice of giving up power. I asked one of my friends, I said, have you ever seen a man give his power, give the torch to a woman and his bank chest? I mean, that's unusual. But this is because Joe Biden has been an unusual type of president. You talk about Lyndon Johnson. You talk about the signing of the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, the Fair Housing Act, the Head Start program. And you talk about Joe Biden with building back a country that was on the brink. So this is an amazing moment. I know we have a tight timeline. But the thing the president said tonight, he talked about the joy he has in public service. I am so grateful that I know such a human being who puts his country ahead of his party and who will pass this torch to a tremendous proven leader. Kamala Harris is ready. She was ready on day one, and Joe Biden, when he selected her almost 4 years ago in August, he knew he wanted somebody to be prepared for this moment. She will meet the moment, and I'm so proud to have known Joe Biden as a leader, as a fighter, and I'm going to help him over the next 6 months.
You know, in watching this Oval Office address closely, Donna, I took note that this didn't seem to be a campaign speech tonight. This was not a rally. This was really, it seemed, a moment for the president to define his decision in his own terms, to explain why he believes the stakes are so great, this moment for democracy. He argued that's why he stepped aside in this race, that this was larger than any title, than than himself, essentially, is what he came down to. And what do you make of this ABC News reporting at this hour that the characterization of the Biden family these last couple of days, a source saying that's not exactly the true reflection of how they feel tonight, that tonight they are, gratitude is the word for so many people in this country pointing to Joe Biden now and calling him a patriot who stepped in when democracy needed it.
What a beautiful family. His sister, I talked to his sister. I stay in touch with the family. I stay in touch with Dr. Biden. They're really a remarkable resource of joy. They're fighters, too. I love their spirit. And when the president was getting just this hit and that hit, the family stayed close. And, you know, they just kept the faith. This is a wonderful, wonderful, phenomenal human being. And I'm so glad that I've known him, and I'm going to help him. But more importantly, what you saw tonight, and I hope every American, especially the young people today, I hope they can find joy in seeing what a real, true public servant is all about. He put his country first. He said, I want to do this for the country.
Donna Brazil with us tonight as well. Donna, thank you. We're getting Republican reaction tonight here as well. In fact, former President Donald Trump was back on the campaign trail tonight, holding a rally in Charlotte, North Carolina. Trump has been attacking President Biden over his decision to withdraw from the race, and he has now turned his attacks to Vice President Kamala Harris. Here again on that, Rachel Scott tonight.
With the eyes of the world on the White House, tonight in North Carolina, Donald Trump plowing ahead with his campaign, taking the stage for the first time since Sunday's political earthquake.
Thank you.
President Biden out of the race. Vice President Kamala Harris, now Trump's new opponent.
Kamala Harris is unfit to lead. She's unfit to lead. She'll destroy our country in a year.
Trump, who spent years attacking Biden, now quickly trying to recalibrate to focus on Harris, zeroing in on her role in the administration. Harris tasked with addressing the root causes of migration at the southern border.
With all of the things they've done wrong, everything, the borders are. When you look at how bad they are, you say, you know, I like Trump, but now I really like Trump because we don't want to go back.
But several Republican members of Congress now taking aim at Harris's identity as the first woman of color to serve as vice president, labeling her a DEI hire, shorthand for diversity, equity, and inclusion.
I think she was a DEI hire.
100%. She was a DEI hire.
Sources tell ABC News House Speaker Mike Johnson has privately warned Republicans to stop.
This is not personal with regard to Kamala Harris, and her ethnicity or her gender have nothing to do with this whatsoever.
Today in the New York Times, Hillary Clinton writing of Harris, I know she can defeat Donald Trump. But Clinton adding, I know a thing or two about how hard it can be for strong women candidates to fight through the sexism and double standards of American politics. Noting Harris will face unique additional challenges as the first black and South Asian woman to be at the top of a major party's ticket. And on social media, Clinton showing this 2021 clip of Trump's running mate, Senator J.D. Vance, disparaging Harris for not having children.
We're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made, and so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. And it's just a basic fact. You look at Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC, the entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children.
Hillary Clinton's reaction, what a normal, relatable guy who certainly doesn't hate women having freedoms. But here in North Carolina, Trump supporters we spoke to say they're worried about the new excitement Harris could bring to the race.
So you think it could be more of a challenge for Trump that Harris is on the ticket?
I do. Yeah, I do. I think Harris will. Like I say, I think she'll bring new life into the party for the Democrats. And looking at, you know, the last couple of weeks or couple months especially, how everything's gone haywire, you know, they're going to try to find unity in it. And I think that she'll, you know, give them that lift.
Really interesting to hear from Democrats and Republicans that they believe that Kamala Harris, whether you're going to support her or not, is injecting new energy into this race. Rachel, I wanted to ask you about something that just came out moments ago, this image. I know you're read in on this. Apparently Donald Trump watching President Biden in the Oval Office a short time ago. And what are you learning?
Yeah, David, the former president wrapped up his rally here in North Carolina just minutes before President Biden gave this Oval Office address. And the former president then got on his plane, and these pictures floating around from his own campaign advisors of the former president watching President Biden give this speech from the White House. Even though President Biden is not even in the race anymore, it is clear that he has been top of mind for Donald Trump. For the last few days, even though Biden has been out of the race, Trump has been railing and attacking President Biden. He has spent the last 600 days focused on this rematch with President Biden. And now, of course, he's trying to readjust and focus on Vice President Kamala Harris. That is proving to be a little bit of a challenge, David.
Well, talk to us a little bit about that, because today was the first time we actually saw Donald Trump since Kamala Harris became his true opponent here, now at the top of the ticket. And he had said earlier this week on a call with reporters that, now we've got to start all over, essentially, visibly frustrated that Joe Biden had stepped down from the race.
Visibly frustrated. He's been airing out his grievances about President Biden stepping aside in this race, essentially saying that, in his own words, that he has to start all over again now with a new rival that he has to figure out a way to attack. Look, Donald Trump wanted it to be President Biden, especially given all of the questions about his mental fitness and his age coming off of that debate where they believe that the president performed very poorly in that debate. And so now they're trying to switch gears and try and test out new lines against Vice President Kamala Harris. We know that this is something that the campaign had been bracing for a number of weeks now, clearly picking up on the cues and the growing pressure on President Biden to step aside. But this is now their reality, and they're drilling in and trying to figure out their new attack on Vice President Kamala Harris, David.
Rachel Scott with us here again tonight. Rachel, thank you. Of course, the next president will face a number of world conflicts, including the Israel-Hamas war, the president urging a ceasefire in Gaza, and the return of all hostages. Of course, President Biden, Vice President Harris, and Donald Trump, all three of them are expected to have meetings with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu while he's here in the U.S. He addressed that joint meeting of Congress today in Washington. Protests on the outside in Washington, a warm welcome inside. Let's bring in our Chief Global Affairs Correspondent, Martha Raddatz, co-anchor of This Week. And Martha, the next president also inherits not only the issues here at home, the economy, immigration, abortion rights, but these conflicts, Israel, Gaza, Russia, and Ukraine, and of course, rising concern over China.
Exactly, David. In fact, today, for what we believe is the first time, U.S. jets, NORAD jets, intercepted Chinese bombers and two Russian bombers off the coast of Alaska. As far as we know, that has not happened in recent times. That was just off the coast of Alaska, about a 150-mile area on that coastline. So that is something that President Biden has certainly been briefed on. But what he really has to do in these coming months is concentrate solely on being president, because it can be a very vulnerable time if you are, in fact, a lame duck president. The world will be watching. Our adversaries will be watching. He also wants badly for that Gaza war to end and for the hostages to return home. Benjamin Netanyahu did not mention a ceasefire today, but we know that negotiations are doing fairly well. They believe they may be in the closing stages of that, according to a U.S. official. Sadly, we have heard that before, and it hasn't happened, but we have had many hostages released. David?
Martha Raddatz with us tonight as well. Thank you, Martha, as always. When we come back on this ABC News special report tonight, Terry Moran is standing by on the state of this race tonight. The new polls, the new national polls just out in the last 24 hours. Where does this race now stand between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris? The numbers have been eye-opening. We're also going to hear from Reince Priebus tonight. He was the former chief of staff to Donald Trump, former head of the RNC, on what the Republican Party, what Republican leaders are saying behind closed doors tonight. What do they make of the new polls? Do they think Kamala Harris is a formidable candidate? We'll hear from the Republican side and the state of this race, these new numbers, in just a moment. Stay tuned.
Struggling